And the Y'all Show is back on with you. Hello, I'm Jon Rawl, and this is the show that's all about the Southeast as we try to let y'all know what's going on here in this part of the world, but what's going on in all of the land. And we've got a very special guest. It's our first Mr. Dad interview, as we're not going to be joined by author, podcaster, a guy that's been all over the media for a long time with his advice on new dads. And we're talking about Armin Brott. He's our very special guest. He's got a new edition of his The Expectant Father out, and Armin's joining us right now. Welcome into the Y'all Show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, appreciate your time. Of course, you are Mr. Dad. If you don't believe me, y'all just go to MrDad.com, and you'll see all the great work that he's got there going at MrDad.com. Armin, first of all, you're not from the South, but we here in the South are we're excited about the opportunity to talk to you, but how in the world does someone like you get in this niche, this dad niche?
Well, it started off when my then wife was pregnant with our first baby, and I was having all these thoughts and concerns and worries and was wondering what kind of dad I was going to be and how we could afford it, and started looking around, and there were no resources. There were no books for dads. There were no classes, no magazine articles. It was just nothing. And I got really angry at that because I thought that there was plenty of information out there for women. And so I ended up, after just getting angry for a little while, I ended up sitting down to write the books that I wish I would have had at the time. And that's how the Expectant Father came to be. And that's how all the books that came after that have also come to be, that they, again, are the books that I wanted to have, the information that I would have needed. And they've actually, over the years since the books have been out, I've constantly revised them. They seem to resonate with people. There's a lot of guys who say, I was thinking the same thing, or I had the same worries about that. And I didn't know how important I was in my kids' lives until I read about it in your book. And so it's been very much a labor of love for quite a while.
Well, it is a labor of love for you, and we're glad that labor of love did end up coming your way. As this book you have, The Expectant Father, it's been out for several years. In fact, you've come up with various versions and updates to it through the years. And when I was kidding, I wasn't kidding when I mentioned how you kind of got this niche going. If my count is correct, you're up to now 10 books on the subject?
Yes. Yeah, 10 books, and there are more still.
Oh, wow.
I think I have a few things left to say. I'm not quite sure what, but it's, I think I got to get to the teenage years. Now that all my kids are past the teenage years, I can write about them without wanting to throw one of them out the window.
Yeah.
So.
Well, again, you've got all of these various books, and I'll go ahead and throw it out there. I'm in the category of fatherhood, and it's the greatest thrill that I've had in my life, and I'm sure most of your people that are males out there listening right now know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's a change, especially I've only had the one child. You've had three, as you said, but there's something that guys have to kind of go through, and we don't get a lot of attention. Armin, they don't throw baby showers for the fellas. It's more for the females, right?
It is, and I think that there's still a perception out there that guys don't care as much, or that they aren't going to be affected as much, or that mothers are more important than fathers, or mothers contribute more to children to the child development than fathers do. None of that's true, but I think that's the perception, and it's fueled somewhat by the media that portrays fathers. I mean, all you got to do is look at any commercial or any TV show that has a dad in it. He's usually a buffoon, and the kids are smarter than he is, and his wife is smarter than he is, and he's kind of a useless character. And it's sad that we do that, because there's so many guys who, because they don't understand how important they are, don't get more involved. And the kids suffer because of that. They don't realize that they are, but kids who grow up with a lot of mom and dad do better, because men and women contribute very important things, but they're different things. Mm-hmm. And so kids need to have both. They need to have dad in their life doing things that dads do, and they will need to have dads who are not mommy's little helper, but they're dads who will have an independent relationship with the mom.
Right.
And with the baby, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And one of the things I know your book stresses, sometimes even the smallest things, especially as these children are infants, some of the smallest things you can do make a difference. I know you talked about going to the grocery store and picking up a kiwi, for example, and holding it up for your child to see and hold and relate that word kiwi. And that's something that hopefully your children still remember. And if nothing else, they learn what the word kiwi is.
Well, even before that, though, I mean, I remember taking my little kids to the store when they were just months old and doing the thing with the kiwi and just rubbing it on their hands so they could feel how soft it is, and then rubbing a coconut on their hands so they could feel how rough that is. And part of that is to teach them something, maybe a little bit about the difference between a kiwi and a coconut, but some of it is also just to hear my voice, and so I get used to hearing their voice, and I can see what they like, and I can see how they respond to things, and we're just getting to know each other. If you want to have a relationship with a child, there is no shortcut. You're going to have to spend some time doing just the most basic things like going to the grocery store and shopping, or taking them to the bank or wherever it is that you want to go. And that's how the relationships start and the relationships build, because you get to know each other and you know how you respond. And then gradually your child gets to know how you respond to him, or that you like kiwis better than coconut because you've talked about it a lot. But it's all the simplest things. There's no magic to it. It's just time.
Yep. We're visiting with Mr. Dad, MrDad.com, the website. Armin Brott, our very special guest. He's penned The Expectant Father, in addition to tons of other great books, mostly on the subject of fatherhood. And The Expectant Father, that's sort of your main book, the one that you've actually had various releases of through the years, right?
Well, that's had 4 different editions, and I've got another one coming up here that'll probably be out in June.
Okay.
And then there's the sequel to that is The New Father, A Dad's Guide to the First Year, and that's had 3 editions. And then there's the Toddler Years book that just had a new edition came out, and that's the 3rd edition of that one. So we're constantly updating them and changing them, and I mean, things change as far as child development, and new studies come out that say that the old ones weren't worth anything. And there's also a lot of stuff that changes having to do with technology, and particularly with kids who are a little bit older than infants, of how much you want them to be involved in technology. And do you want them to be using a phone before they can talk? Which is a common thing in parents around the country. Is parents are giving their kids their iPads, or they're giving them the smartphone to play with. And these kids really, some of them can't even walk. And they're already getting familiar with a lot of technological things, and it's causing problems. But so those are the kinds of things that are making me constantly want to update the books, is I want them to be as informative and as relevant to dads, regardless of how old their kids are, as they go through the process, so that they'll have something that can guide them all the way through, from pregnancy all the way through the teenage years.
And the first edition of The Expectant Father came out what year?
I'm horrified to say this, but it was 1995.
Okay, so we're now 25 years into this thing, and I was going to ask you about what kind of changes have you had to revise, and some of this technology stuff is part of it. I know as a father, my child's now 9 years old, and he got an iPad pretty early on in the process and became very, like most of these kids these days, attached to that or a smartphone. As a parent, should I look down on myself for that? Is that bad parenting to have my child have an iPad?
No, I don't think having your child have an iPad is a bad thing at all. I think in limited doses, that's actually a good thing. We know that it can keep them quiet for a little while if we need that to happen. But I think it's important to understand, and I interviewed pediatricians and other researchers on this, and they were finding that when kids spend a huge amount of time on iPads, they end up with poor muscle control and less coordination than kids used to have. And if you just think about this, I mean, you think about when you were a kid, you'd spend time as a baby trying to balance blocks on top of each other, right? You'd get one block on top of another one, then that would fall over. And then as you got a little bit more coordinated, you'd be able to put a block, another one. You could do 2 or you could do 3. But if you think about it on an iPad, dragging a block across one side of the screen and putting it on top of a block on another side of the screen doesn't require any kind of coordination or any kind of feel of how things are balanced or how they're out of balance. Because if you put the block a little too far to the right or the left, it's going to fall, right? But if you put it more in the middle, you got a chance of building a higher tower. You don't get that with a iPad or by picking on iPads, but any kind of tablet or computer thing. When you're dragging something and you just drop it anywhere nearby, it's going to line up right on top. And so kids are not developing the hand-eye coordination and the small muscle control that they really need. And we don't know exactly how that's going to play out years down the road, but doctors are seeing this in patients that show up in their office, that they're not able to control themselves. Their handwriting is worse when they get a little bit older because they haven't had a chance to figure out how to balance something in their fingers. So it's, I'm hesitant to criticize people for it because I think it's an important part of our life, and you don't want your kid to grow up never having had one. At the same time, though, I think moderation, as with pretty much everything else in life, is really important. That we need to make sure that, they can play with the iPad, but, they also ought to get outside and roll around in the dirt and throw things and climb trees and play sports and everything else.
Great input from MrDad.com. Armin Brott, our very special guest here on today's Y'all Show. We're not done with Armin. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk to him about his book, The Expectant Father, and some other great advice for dads. And, hey, moms out there can benefit from this conversation as well. That's still to come here as we continue on with more of the Y'all Show. And welcome back to Y'all. I'm Jon Rawl. This is the show that is all about the South, and we have a very special guest joining us here on the program today, as his book, The Expectant Father, has been out now for 25 years, and he's had 9 other books to accompany this fatherdom writing that he does. Armin Brott, our special guest. MrDad.com is the website, and his nickname is Mr. Dad, and he's continuing his conversation with us now about being a dad and all that entails. Armin, the father of 3, and if you're writing books and have penned all these books throughout 25 years, out of the 3 kids, hopefully you're batting 1,000 there, Armin.
Well, I think I'm setting the bar a little bit low, but I'm thinking, well, there's 3 daughters, and I say to myself every once in a while, well, none of them are pregnant, none of them are doing drugs, none of them are in jail. So I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, I joke about that, but I realize that not everybody is quite that lucky. That sometimes we do have problems with kids, and they get themselves into trouble, and we feel that reflects on us somehow. When sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it's tough being a parent. It's tough being a kid in today's world. All the distractions, all of the me now generation, and I just want to congratulate you thus far. Of course, I guess you've got a ways to go to keep that 1,000% going. But with all the temptations out there in the world that we live in, it makes for a very difficult childhood. So what if you're a parent and your kids aren't doing so great? Let's say they're somewhere around 500 batting average with your children. What should a parents do when they do have those rough spots with their children?
Well, I think the most important thing is to spend more time with them, and to ask a lot of questions and spend a lot of time listening. That we need to find out exactly what the problem is. Is it a school issue? And if it's a school issue, if the grades are not what you think that they ought to be, is that because your child needs extra attention, because maybe needs glasses, or is getting bullied at school, or is bored? Possibly. There are just so many different reasons. But if you just look at the report card and say, you're getting C's and you should be getting A's, and then everybody's mad at each other and you take their privileges away, and it just doesn't help anything. But I think parents don't ask enough questions, and they don't listen enough to the answers. And in a lot of cases, the kids will tell us what's wrong if we listen to them, and we do so without judging them. If we ask those questions, listen to the answers, we're able to help them. And sometimes we can help. And sometimes it's just a question of spending more time with them and having dinners with them regularly to let them know that we really care who their friends are, and we care what they're doing with their life, and we care about their hobbies and what they think about things. And sometimes we need to bring in some professionals if it's really an issue where you've got a child who's self-harming in some way, taking drugs or cutting or doing other kinds of self-destructive things. That's probably something that most of us as parents aren't equipped to deal with on our own, so we need to know when to ask for help. But it really is, again, it's about spending time with them, listening to them, and letting them know that you're there for them if they need the help.
Visiting with Armin Brott. He's written The Expectant Father, among a bunch of books. And Armin, one of the books that caught my attention as a single father, I will point out that I can't wait to get my hands on this particular book. The Single Father is one of your books that you've penned, A Dad's Guide to Parenting Without a Partner. Now, that one had to be a little bit different for you to write, since a lot of let's be honest, roughly half of probably all fathers out there aren't in a what we call a traditional family unit.
Yeah, it was hard for me, and it was hard for me because as I was writing it, I was going through it, and so I knew exactly what I was talking about. But I think part of it is, a lot of it came from this idea that, and we talked a little bit earlier about that there's so many more resources available for women. When you hear the word or the phrase single mom, a lot of things come into your mind of a woman who's overworked, she's got problems dealing with the kids, or she needs our sympathy, she needs our support. But when you hear single father, and there are just as many single fathers as single mothers, we don't have the same images. We think of a guy maybe who takes his kids to McDonald's every day, or tries to buy their love with taking them to Disneyland, or whatever it is. A lot of stereotypes. And the reality is that because of the lack of social support, and in many cases because of the lack of legal support, and the fact that kids still to this day tend to be given more to the mom than to the dad, and the moms have more time with custody or visitation or access, whatever you want to call it, that a lot of guys don't realize, again, how important they are. And it's easy to back away because you spend so much time saying goodbye to your kids if you can only see them every other weekend and a Wednesday afternoon, and you don't get a chance to see how important you are in their lives. And so one of the things I try to do in The Single Father is what I try to do in all the books, is to let guys know how important they are, and then give them specific strategies and exercises, or not, I can call it exercises, but just activities you can do with your kids to maximize the time that you have with them, so that they know that you're there and you have time to get to know them and they have time to get to know you.
All very good input again, and from Armin Brott, our very special guest, our author of several books, and MrDad.com is his website. And you've got all these books through the years, mostly with this fatherly advice to the fellow fathers of the world. And Armin, I want to ask, as we kind of wrapping up our conversation with Armin here, have you got any grief from females, from the moms of the world? Are they asking you, hey, are you going to write something for us at some point? Hey, don't leave us gals out here alone, Armin.
It's funny that the first time I went to a big book fair, they have them every year in New York and Los Angeles, where they introduce new books. And I went when the first edition of The Expectant Father came out, and there were a bunch of people standing in line wanting to get copies of the book. And the first woman in line first person in line was a woman. And she said to me, and kind of angry, she said, "Why do you have to write a book for fathers?" And I thought, wow, because there aren't any. I mean, that's why. And because you have, as a woman, you have 50 different options, and guys just don't have them. There have been a few more that have come out. I don't think they're quite as good, of course, but I think I get a lot of comments and emails from women saying, I bought this for my husband, but I started reading it, and I thought it was really interesting too, and it's really great, and it's helped him to become a better dad. And so it's definitely, the books are definitely written for women as well, although there's information that's specific to dads. A lot of it is, I think, for the moms to understand what the dads are going through is so important. It's important for them, but it's also important for the dad, so that he can have a sense that his partner is with him throughout the whole thing.
All right. And you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you're looking to do even more updates to, let's say, the granddaddy of them all, the Expectant Father. What kind of changes are we going to see in the future with your granddaddy book?
Well, I think it's just gonna continue to get bigger, and I guess it'll get smaller in places where it needs to be, but it'll get bigger as far as adding things in there. I think more different types of families are coming up, a lot more single fathers, a lot more things. I really want to explore these issues that you hear so much about sometimes there's three parents that are genetically related, because they'll take different pieces of DNA from different, the egg from one person, the sperm from somebody else, and part of the egg from something else. It's fascinating stuff. And I think that we also need to, as parents, we have to deal whether you like the idea or not, but with different types of kids who are gender non-conforming or binary, and things that are, that as a young parent, when I started having kids 20-something years ago, never occurred to me at all that I might be facing these. But these are some of the issues that a lot of people face, and so it's never changing. I mean, it's always changing, and it's never the same, and it's always fun because it's new and it's exciting every time. I think it's it gives me great joy to keep up to date on all the new stuff.
MrDad.com, the website. Armin Brott's been our very special guest. All I can say, Armin, is keep those books coming. And for all the dads and expectant fathers out there, now to go to the website, MrDad.com, and learn a whole lot more about what it means to be a father, and some great tips, and maybe save you a lot of time and money if you follow some of Armin's advice. Thank you very much for coming on today's Y'all Show.
John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Well, more of the Y'all Show will continue after this. Thanks for listening.